good, Danny. How are you?
Yeah, good, buddy. All right, I've whipped together. I'm trying to get a little bit more professional with this bloody thing, mate. So I'll put together a little bit of an intro to. So just bear with me, all right, mate?
No worries, mate.
No easy. So today on Unspoken Truth, we're joined by a man that I like to refer to as the modern day Ned Kelly, redefining what it means to stand up for what you believe. You've probably seen him on the feeds, exposing the systems that have locked us all into a political narrative, or simply reminding us all that knowledge is power, and in unification we can be heard. With a substantial amount of social media followers and a message that cuts through the noise, JohnnyQ has become more than just a TikTok sensation. He's a genuine Aussie trying to make a difference for the benefit of future generations of Australians. Behind the viral videos is a story worth telling, one about purpose, struggle, faith, and finding light in the darkest of places. This isn't just about going viral, this is about why the truth, when spoken with action, can actually change lives. Johnny Q, thanks for taking the time to join me on Unspoken Truth, mate. How are you going today?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Daniel. Thanks for that intro, mate. It's a pretty special intro. I've never been spoken about like this before.
Hey, I'll pay me respects where they've been earned, brother. Don't worry about that.
Thanks, mate. I
Um,
appreciate it. You didn't have to use AI with that, did you?
sorry?
Did you use AI with that?
I might have used a little bit of a template from AI, mate.
Good, mate. I mean, that's the whole thing. What we're talking about the knowledge you're getting out there. So I'm happy about that
Yeah,
because
yeah, no, definitely. Look, I can't mask that that's all my intellect, mate. I pinched a bit of
that's
that.
great. No, you read it out well, mate. So you made it believable that you wrote it.
Nah, too easy, mate. Well, let's get straight into it, bud. Let's go. I think a lot of people would like to know, and myself, as to what sort of led you to the path of doing what you're doing, mate, and exposing what's going on.
Well, it began in 2020, where I was here in South Australia, but I was watching what was unfolding in Victoria, where I was born, and I've got a lot of friends and family over there. So I just very early on in the piece started picking up what was going on with the propaganda. So I switched off the TV. My mum was battling cancer at that stage in Victoria. She had stage 4 small cell lung cancer. She wasn't a smoker. She smoked for a small period of time of her life, but it would happen later in life. But anyway, she was fighting that. And obviously, when they locked everything down, especially in Melbourne, it got really tough for mum because she couldn't go to the gym. She couldn't go to the 1,000 steps up in Fenchurch Gully. She couldn't do all these things that were because she was really kicking ass with the cancer. Like even after 4 years, she was still on top of it all. And she went through 2 Peter Mac clinical trials. So when you sort of get admitted to one of these clinical trials, like the rest of your body has to be like A1, so that the drug is specifically researched and see how it affects that particular disease. If you've got other stuff in your body, you won't be part of that clinical trial, right? So she had her body, mind, body, spirit, everything. She was Buddhist as well, so she was very in tune with everything, doing really well. But when Dan Andrews locked everything down, it became very tough. So that was tough for me to see that from over here, watching her sort of go downhill. And then what I did was I thought to myself at the time that it would be a good time to hit the university. I always had a bit of a thing for wanting to study at university because mum had started studying late in life. She didn't start studying uni until 51 and she ended up with 3 degrees before she passed. So, and she sort of showed me throughout her 20 years that, things in life can happen that you can sort of stop your studies and go back to it. So that was, and it's something that I'm actually doing now, right? Now, so it was a bit of a thing. I always try and kill 2 birds with one stone. So one of the things was I'll study law because I can foresee that this is what we're going to need to know going forward because all of our laws were being sort of tested and encroached on, like the freedom of travel between states, bodily autonomy, all these sort of things were coming to the forefront. So I thought law's the one I've got to study. Now, I started with a criminology degree because I'm only a tradesman and I got into it that way. And then once I got my marks high enough, I jumped into law and legal practice. But at that time, it was good because I was really engaging with mum. She was like my mentor. And that was really uplifting her spirits, which was counteracting what was happening on the ground over there. So that was good. Look, and then, it got to a point where I was watching what was unfolding in Melbourne and I was jumping out of my skin here. I was ringing politicians, but they just didn't want to know about it. They just said, oh, it's Victoria. And I was saying, well, are you Australian first or are you South Australian first? And they didn't want to know about it. So that got my nose out of joint. And then eventually I ended up taking off and going over there. I had enough, and I think it was just before Christmas. And I said, no, I'm going to go see Mum. So I went over there, and I came back. I think I took the kids over there. Yeah, we went over there with the kids, and I just said, we'll just keep it on the download that, that we're going to do this. I stayed off the beaten tracks. I went over there, saw Mum, the kids saw Mum. We came back. When I came back, I dropped the kids off, and I went fishing. That afternoon, I had my next door neighbour ring me up saying the police are at the front looking for you. So I basically went back home. I packed all my gear up, and I left to go out of the state that night, back into Victoria, because what it was is that when Victoria opened up their borders to anyone, if you weren't vaccinated or non-vaccinated, the day that I left to go from here to there, on the way back, so as I left, South Australia put out the order saying that anyone that was returning from Victoria to South Australia had to have vaccinations. And I was like, this is insane. And I'm like, that's not going to happen. But anyway, I went over there. I went back, sort of got out of the state because the local police were after me. People had said, look, he's gone across the border. He's come back. Some people who were pissed off in the community for me speaking out. I wasn't wearing a mask at those times. I got an exemption. So, it's been a full-on journey, mate, because at the same time as learning at uni in 2022, in January, I took off to Canberra and went and protested with everyone else. And that ended up being from, a couple of thousand of us in the first day to over 200,000 of us within a couple of weeks. And that was just the most amazing, intense, crazy, one-off experience I've ever experienced in my life. And my life literally changed from that experience on. So that was 2022. After that, I deferred from uni that semester. I came back. I literally renovated my house, put it on the market, sold it, and went travelling around basically the east coast of Australia to see what was going on, to meet all these people that I'd met at Canberra and what they were talking about, whether it was original jurisdiction with the Aboriginals, whether it was people who were talking about the corporate government of Australia and how they were getting out of the system. So it took me to, Victoria, New South Wales. I went, all the way around the place, the hinterland, Queensland up north and sunny coast, all of that region, inland as well. And just to see these communities and people and town hall meetings. And I mean, it's phenomenal what's going on across the country. And I don't think anyone's really got as clear a picture of what's going on than me because of the experience that I've had. It's quite unique. I can actually show you here. In this, I'm sure you can see it there. So can you see the writing?
Vaguely, mate.
Yeah. Vaguely, right? So it says 2022. And I etched all this. So January, Canberra Library, Ground Zero. February, Epic. Then I went at Admittedly Camp. So that was down in the high region. Warri Camp, Chicken Run Farm, Kalula, right? So these are the four sort of camps we had after we got kicked out of Epic that people didn't really know about. Everyone talks about Epic, but there were still four camps there. We had so many people still on around Canberra, right? Because they couldn't go back to WA. Then I've got Yarrangobilly Caves, and we had Wittingen Festival. When we had the GGs, there's still people protesting there. Bangalore, Byong, Waniassa, Kosciuszko. Then Canberra, Queanbeyan, Warri, back to Goolwa. So that's coming back to South Australia. Then, so we're talking about April 2022, back to Canberra, Mount Ainslie. So I sort of came back, went back as a protest. We were still doing stuff over there. Then I went up to Ingonia in Burke. This is in April to see Buddy Shillingsworth. Went and met them on country, right? Then I came back, Sydney, when we did the Opera House, which was we opened up the House of Law for Buddy, but now he's flipped, right? It's crazy. Back to Canberra, Waniassa, Chum Creek, which is Melbourne, Baronia, that's when I was with Mum. Then May, Phillip Island, continue on the Gold Coast, Gin, Townsville, Mackay, back to Melbourne. So from Queensland back to Melbourne. Then Waniassa, Torquay, Goolwa, and then June, back to Victoria. So you can see that I was just documenting it and I was going all around the place. And it wasn't like going around the place just having fun. It was going around the place, seeing what people were doing. And, you tie in with old family law court stuff with parents, which is a whole kettle of fish that I was dealing with at the beginning with Helen Delaney. So this is where sort of now, so I went back to uni. So the thing is, and I've also been challenging the court because of, just driving offences, but that's the only way sort of getting the court to see if these things that what people are saying are true and real. And once you get in there and you start challenging these things, you do see how corrupted the system is and how one-sided the system is, and that they don't like people like self-represented litigants going in there because we're breaking away from having to pay thousands of dollars to a lawyer to do things that we can probably do ourselves, as you know now.
Well, and just to interject there, mate, paying thousands of dollars for a lawyer who actually have their first obligation to represent the court's best interest, not their clients, don't they?
And that's it. And that's the saying that goes behind the scenes is, they've got when they sort of get admitted to the bar, they become servants of the court, and then their allegiance lies to court, colleague, then client.
Yeah.
So you're the last in the whole scheme of things, right? Because you come and go, they stay. And that's the mentality for them, is to say, well, the court, because they're the one who gives us our business and gives us our working environment, then the colleague, because they're the people they work with on a daily basis, and then client, because we come and go. Yeah. So there's this mentality, right, of their structure that we're trying to explain to them. And it's difficult because the only place to do it is in the courtroom, and when we go in there, they're very obstructive and they don't really want to listen to anything. Now, this is where it gets a little bit confusing for people, because some people are going in there like the sovereign citizen arguments and they're not getting anywhere. Yeah. And I'll sort of change my tune in a sense that I understand and comprehend what those people are saying and what the knowledge that they've got, but I see it time and time again that it doesn't get anywhere in the court. So I'm like, that's the definition of insanity, trying to do the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? So I'm like, well, I'll try and ideate a lot of stuff about how to go about this, and knowing that stuff, which is very difficult because you just want to go out and say, hey, you're a bunch of, Freemason, corrupt, bloody this and that. You're feeling it, but you just can't say it because it's not the way to sort of communicate, I suppose. They're just going to put up the shutters and then you're just going to get in trouble and whatever. So it's a bit more of a mental game to be able to understand what's going on, comprehend what's going on, and then fight your fight in a way that speaks in their lingo, plays by their rules, according to their procedures.
And so, mate, is it fair to say then that's the brainchild of the Self-Represented Litigant Association that you've got running?
Well, where that come from was me studying the likes of like Brian Shaw, Ken Bartel, Dick Yardley, all these guys that have been at it, written books about the corporate government, about what's going on. And Brian, number one, he has been in and out of the courts that many times over the last 20 years, and he's never been put in jail. And he's only ever gone in there for a speeding fine, or a parking fine. Because this is where I got that angle to get in there. You've got to get in there somehow. And if you're going to get in there, you want to get in there through the summary jurisdiction. That's your entry point. So that one there, because if you're going to be challenging this stuff, you don't want to sort of have stuff that they're going to put you in jail for, right? Yeah, it's just you're challenging the system. So Brian, and because Brian's he's only a sheep farmer, but he's a very knowledgeable man of God, and he's done a lot of work. And he went over to WA, holding a lot of politicians to account for what they've done. But what I'm starting to realise now is that when you find out that when you're trying to hold the system to account, the system can never say to itself, yeah, I've done the wrong thing per se. Like it's, especially when it's serious, like when it's really connected with a lot of departments, a lot of people, they would like to always say there's a separation of powers, which we know there isn't. No. Only when it suits them, in a sense. So it's about breaking these things down, these concepts with people over time, talking about it. But the actual, the Self-Represented Litigant Association came because I studied all those guys and thought, what's missing? Why do the guys not get anywhere, right? And I came to the conclusion that when I was studying tort law, it dawned on me that self-reps had never been classified as a body of persons. So, for example, when you want to sue someone for negligence, the tort of negligence, you have to find out what the body of persons were first. So was it a doctor and a patient? Was it a government and a citizen, or council and a resident? Was it a builder and a chippy? And then from there, you can say, okay, are they held to a professional standard or a normal standard? And the professional standard, I thought, wait a second. I just took it back a step. I went, self-represented litigants. I'm like, we're not classified a body of people as a body of persons. I'm like, why is that? Because no one had organised or put together a body and said, we're an association. So that's what I've done. Now, what does that mean? That means that this association, this group of people, where we can advocate to the legislature for rights. We don't go to the judge and the judiciary for rights. The laws get written in the legislature. So the association now goes, advocates to the legislature and says, hey, we've identified that we haven't got any rights, that we haven't got this, we're not getting compensated for our time, we haven't done this, blah, 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 blah. And I've already written an act for it. So what happens then is that once this gets built, the long game is that they introduce the bill, the protections come in, and then when the protections come in, when we go into court, the judges have to abide by those protections.
Yeah. And so an example of that, mate, is as a self-represented litigant, you're not entitled to the cover of costs.
Exactly. There's a lot of things there that they don't charge. So if the police withdraw the charges, like happened to me after 10 months, hundreds and hundreds of hours, stress, damage to your character, a lot of stuff. Like there's a lot of stuff that happens that you're not compensated for, and everyone wipes their hands. And I'm like, this is insane. And then when you are proven that you didn't do anything wrong, so you want compensation, you have to go back and face the state and start suing the state as a self-rep. And this is like, it's incredible because they just stonewall you, and they don't play by the rules. They don't abide by any of the model litigant provisions that they're supposed to. And it's quite interesting because I know all this stuff, and they still, when I say it to them, they still ignore it. And I'm starting to get really angry, because I'm able to sit in the courtroom now against a barrister and call them out, like without looking at any notes, So, and I'm only getting sharper and sharper and sharper. So, to me, I'm like, well, I'm just sort of creating this pressure where I'm like, there's not much else I can do apart from being at the coalface, applying that pressure in a smart way where I don't get locked up or held in contempt. I'm still using their lingo and their words, just arguing what they're not doing, making it logical from our perspective, and bringing that to light in the courtroom on the record.
Well, mate, as a father that's self-represented in a few different jurisdictions over 100 times over the past 10 years, I implore the fact that you've dug in and decided to put something together like this, because as you just pointed out, the frustration that's put to you when you put all this time and effort in researching how it's supposed to operate, then you go in there as a self-represented litigant and they're not even abiding by their own rules. They're just completely what they want.
Well, this is interesting because I said this when I went into university after I went to the last court hearing, and I went into uni that day. I had a lecture, and the guy said, "Oh, anyone want to have a chat about what's your day's going, your uni life's going?" I said, "Yeah, I've got something to say." I said, "I've just been in court this morning." He goes, "Oh yeah, you looked all spruced up." I'll just wait for this little thing to go past. So it's coming. Anyway, so I said, "Yeah, look, I'm feeling a bit disillusioned here because everything that we're learning in here doesn't happen in the courtroom." Yeah. And he goes, "That's right." He goes, "It's a different kettle of fish." And I'm like, "Well, what are you teaching us then?" Like, it's not. It's insane that there's this disconnect. They admit it, and no one wants to do anything about it. And then when you go speak to the politicians, they're like, "There's a separation of powers," and I'm like, "We're starting to get a little bit more refined now." Because someone said to me, like, "Well, if they say that, we're going to get that on the record," because they still incumbent. That if something's brought to their attention, they have a duty to investigate. Yeah, especially if that sort of supersedes the separation of powers per se. It's think about it. Otherwise, this is why Clause 5 of the Constitution said all the laws of the land, everything is bound on the courts and the judges. Like, it specifically says courts and judges, and I reckon it had that for a reason, because they knew that was the ultimate sort of epitome of power. They're the ones going to be deciding. So the laws have to be, they have to abide by them too. Otherwise, it can be completely corrupted, completely captured, which I think it is now.
Well, that seems to be superseded by judicial discretion, from my understanding of what I've experienced throughout the system.
Well, that's another problem is discretion. You know, people are dealing with the discretion that the constables have got on the side of the road or at their home or whatever it might be. That you know, the police, the court's always biased to what they sort of portray, you know, in the court, and so that's there. So first of all, you've got the level of discretion from the police. Then you're up against the level of discretion from the magistrate as well.
Yeah.
And those two things coupled can just feel like, because it is quite, you know, it's disgusting and disgraceful the way that they apply that bias to the prosecution all the time, the police prosecution.
Yeah.
You know, and look, in the family court, I never went in there, but you know, I've done enough research and seen enough documentation on the bias towards women as well, you know. But you know, we're starting to see there's a bit of a, you know, some heavy legislation coming in, but I think people are starting to identify that there are, and it's hard work from people like yourself, Daniel, to get the word out. I think.
Oh, I appreciate that, mate. But you know, I get
your energy that you get around, you know, that you're always moving around, always talking, always advocating, does have an effect. Like, you know, you're part of, you know, the worldwide consciousness, and if you're out there expressing yourself constantly and supporting fellas, you know, who are going through it and whatnot, you'll see that over time those connections start having an effect. It's like a ripple effect, domino effect. You affect that guy. It's like people start waking up all around the place saying, look, you know, and I think a lot of people are starting to agree. Like the lawyers, they're pulling themselves up now for the amount of extra charges that they're doing in that jurisdiction. You know, advocacy groups are saying, look, you know, there's not much. So there's not many people that come out of that system happy, right? Like I don't see many people come out of that system happy.
The lawyers, mate, the barristers, they come out, they got the new car paid off at the expense of every other bastard misery.
And this is another thing, like you know, that we're doing with the association is trying to decentralise the legal system.
Yeah.
And, you know, that means basically doing sort of, you know, it's hard. I didn't want it to be like me just doing all this pro bono sort of work in a sense, not that I'm a lawyer, but what it was is that I just want to share my experience, get other people's experiences on board and share what people are doing. And then obviously I was sort of a bit of a go-getter with the AI stuff. And people are now using that, and I've helped a lot of people. And then, but I've always said to the people I've helped, I said, now that you know, like you explain it to the next person.
Yeah.
Instead of people saying, oh yeah, go speak to Johnny, he'll tell you how to do it. I'm just like, no, I've taught you. Now it's your job now to go tell someone else or show someone else. Yeah. You know, and when you do show someone else or tell someone else how you're doing it, you'll actually embed that in your own mind. And you cement it in your own mind. And what that does is that creates then our sort of level of intelligence slowly starts to creep out and get up. Yeah. And that's what I'm working on. I'm sort of working on educating the masses of like blue collar people that can't afford lawyers, that are struggling now. And I'm like, look, we're just talking about the law, but you know, like I'm a pretty savvy small business owner too. I've run my own successful business for 20 something years. So there's a lot there we can sort of teach young fellas as well with ABNs and, you know, how to leverage write-offs and stuff like that, you know what I mean? So if they're going to be part of that system, well, you know, use the system. But it seems that the system keeps tightening these screws all around the place, you know, for everyone. And there's a lot of traps for everyone.
It does. You well, I mean, the basis of the Self-Representative Litigant Association, the crux of it is that if you educate yourself, you're not going to be up for this expensive journey where you can be promised the world, but at the end of the day, regardless if they get you the outcome or not, you've still got to pay the bill, and they walk away and do it to the next poor bastard.
That's exactly right, Daniel. I mean, to be honest with you, if I'd had to have employed a barrister, or you know, every time they had to go to court and everything over the last couple of years, I've probably been in the vicinity over $250,000 or $300,000 that I've saved.
Yeah.
Would I have spent that money to do that? Well, if you had that kind of money, you know, it depends how much money you got. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't have that money. It's just inconceivable to be able to spend that money, right?
And even if you've got the money, mate, that money should be for your family, for yourself, for your kids' futures, not for some bastard to tell you that, you know, you give it to me and I'll reinstate the mutual respect you should have. Go.
It's a good point. It's a good point. And I mean, that's why I actually took a hit in the settlement when I split up with my ex, because my thought process was, you know what, instead of keep going and fighting and arguing about this, if I just sort of give a little bit more and sort of not worry about it so much, that money will end up going to the kids one day instead of the lawyers. That was my train of thought, as in it was going to go into the estate that the mother has and all that sort of stuff. So, and it sort of, there was two birds in one stone again. One, as I said, the money more likely go to the kids down the track. And number two, it saved arguments and animosity, which made things a little bit smoother, more amicable. And we didn't end up having custody battles or anything like that. So
and just to say, mate, that's the wise choice, because that move is in the best interest of the children.
Yeah, that's the same. I never got ostracized or alienated from the kids, and I didn't do that in return. So there's a level of sort of maturity, I suppose, that people are going to have when the shit goes down, to realise that the statistics are, I think that, 1 in 2.
Quickly on that too, Johnny. I mean, I find that even if parents they've separated and they've agreed that, all right, for the best interest of the kids, we're going to do this, this, and this. The second that you involve any legal professional, their job, their first and foremost point, I believe, is to create the animosity, because the longer it's dragged out, the more they extract from both sides.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what they do. So what I sort of said to people, and is a good thing to do, and you got to do this while you're still in your couple and you're still going good, is that at that point when you're going good, you got to say to each other, so, all right, if we were to go to shit, who would you want me to go to who would actually try and talk us to get back together, not sort of steer us the other way? Because everyone usually goes to the single people and says, come out and party and blah, 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 blah. Because that's what they do. But if you preempt in life, it's like a bit of an insurance policy that you have, but you got to do this when you're actually good.
Yeah.
You can't do this down the track. You do this when you're good, and then you all agree on, you're like, yeah, that person does love us both and wants to see us both together. They're not going to put a wedge between us. They're going to actually try and help us get back together when we need the help, right? Because otherwise, it goes down the path of, if you haven't got that, then women go to their support network, and generally their support networks are bigger than the men's support network.
Yeah.
And women's support networks, because it's bigger, they've got more of anecdotal stories about how the system works, what to do, blah, 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 blah. We can sort of see it coming across as, they work the system more. I just think it's more of a thing that they've just got more knowledge base than what most guys have.
And they have access to a lot more departments and organisations that'll live.
That as well. There's a definite bias towards female support groups and advocacy, as you know, with Justice Net. I think you've had your own experience. I didn't have much luck trying to get help through them, but you yourself, I think, not much luck either. It's more centric towards, LGBTQ women, all that sort of stuff. So, and it's just, look, this is a systemic sort of.
I'll actually give a special mention to Justice Net, mate. And I appreciate you bringing that back up, because I sent in an application trying to get representation, and they told me that my case was far too hard for them to get involved, and there was too much involved in it. And then 6 months later, they turned up as her counsel for the defence. So, there's clearly a political ideology being infected in some of these organisations.
Well, I mean, that's a serious, that's a, you can really ask the question there legally to the people who oversee even Justice Net, because they're lawyers, to say, is it ethical that I reach out for help? They say, no, it's too confusing. And then the next thing you know, they're representing the other party. I mean, that's either discrimination or deceptive conduct, or to me, it seems unethical that you would say no to one person and yes to the other party, right? So this is where we've got to be, instead of getting upset, you got to get analytical.
Yeah.
Right, and analyze everything and see and then just hold people to account.
But as you know, mate, you got to choose your battles. I mean,
that's true. That's true, mate. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and that really is true, man. Because everywhere you look, there's a fight.
Yeah.
Because of the corporations, all right. So, people sort of got to start realising that the country is sort of owned by corporations now. Yeah. And corporations always want a profit.
And I believe, do you believe, mate, that it's the power is in the numbers, like your shirt suggests? Like, it's, if we had enough numbers, they would have no option but to sit down and listen and mediate with what our concerns are.
Exactly. And it's about us communicating in the right way. So, we've sort of been trying to engage politicians and that, and it's like not going the best. And I'm like, got to change our tact a little bit in the sense. So I'm like, I'm sort of in that mode now of going, how do I change this tact? Because I can really focus on it. But it's also consuming, like you want to live your life. Because what happens when you're doing the Self-Litigant Association, you're dealing with everyone that's got a serious drama going on.
Yep.
So even when someone on boards, we have that quick chat over emails or whatever, there's still a lot that gets sort of unloaded onto me. And after a while, like it's been good, I launched it 6 months ago, say now, or 4 or 5 months ago, but it's been like connecting with all those people that we've been working with behind the scenes, where the idea actually came from when I battle tested it all around the country with everyone. I said, what do you reckon? I'm like, does this make sense? And they all said, actually, it does. So then,
touching on that, Johnny, the other aspect too that's probably overlooked by a lot of the members is when you're emotionally involved in your own case, sometimes you get the blinkers put on where you're involved in the outcome. Whereas in the SRLA, the benefits are that you can bounce things off other self-reps and their opinions and their facts and what they've been through can actually help you assist you moving forward.
That's probably the biggest plus of it. I mean, that's how I actually use it for myself. Like, I know I started it, but I mean, that's like the premise of it is because when you connect with other and I connect with people, right? So like yourself, like I'm always tagging you and stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what it is sort of, I just direct energy around with people and connect people up and, see where people are at. Something like a guy messaged me this afternoon, member number 59 or something he was, and he was like, look, and it was a pretty simple council fine that he got from a car that he had parked at the front, and he was trying to move it, and then they came another fine. And I literally just copy and pasted his story, put it into the AI, said, help out this member, spat out some stuff. I proofread it, I copy and pasted it, and I said to him, look, have you checked out the AI videos that I've done? Because that's basically for the members to tell you how to use it. And if you haven't, check it out. And I said, but I just copy and pasted what you wrote to me. And I said, I gave it the instruction of help this member out because my AI is already a bit trained up too, right? Because of the history that we've got, and I paid to keep it memory. So it's just punched out like just really, really basic, really to easily read. And that's the thing is that everything's in layman's terms. Like it's so, I've trained it not to speak legalese.
Yeah.
So it understands what's going on, but it knows that it needs to speak to common people. So it says, right, you need to do this, 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 and this. And this is how you go about it. Challenge this. Gives them 3 or 4 things to do. And what it is that guy will read it and he's like, cool. That's all he wanted. And I'm like, but what I just tried to do was like, even though I gave him that, I just reminded him saying, hey, watch the video because you didn't really need me to ask me this question. You could have just put it in there. But I didn't say it like that. I gave it to him in a nice way. But in that sense of saying you can be doing this stuff yourself. And that's what it's about, right? Because once he goes in there, I said to him, you can copy and paste that now and just refine it with your specific details. Proofread it, amend it if you need to, rewrite it, have another read, and when you're happy with it, send it off, right? So it does all the heavy lifting, and this is where people are going, that sort of shit there. Even the advice for him to send the email to me is just say, well, lawyer, barrister, send that email back, have a think about it, construct something. It would be fucking charging in time, right? Like, all that sort of stuff, but
and I just think then, mate, that's where I picked it up. It was you telling me about the AI stuff, and I've gone to it myself. And as you said and explained to me, you can't just jump on there once and expect it to be beneficial. You need to train this to know how you want it to respond.
I just want to, because I just played around with it the other day, and I thought to myself, because you can use it. If you start thinking like you're like, wow, wait a second, I can start using this thing like in different spheres of life.
Yeah.
So what I did was for one of my dating app profiles, right? I thought to myself, why don't I get AI to write up my profile, as in what it has to say about me? And
I am interested to hear this.
Right, and the thing was, right, was that I just want to read out. I can tell you are deep. Your bio suggests it. Incredible bio, by the way. And I'm so can you see how this is like people don't realize in little ways, AI is being used, and it's not that it's not that you're being deceptive. What it is, it's an extension of something you're trying to say, but you can't say. You haven't got the words, And this, because they're a large language model, right? It is like smarter than any human on the planet.
Yeah.
So if you say to it, look, I think I said, look, I'm on a houseboat. I want to meet someone. I just want to just make it sound like, it's just a soul searcher, blah, blah, blah. And it just pumps out pretty much those words, but puts it all in a perfect way.
Yeah.
Copy and paste that, and you're like, that's exactly what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
So it sort of takes down this barrier of people who think they can't do things or can't write things or can't, like my AI now, it can write code and just make me up a flow chart, right? So if you want to explain to someone something, you go, how do I get this to people understand it? You go, right, give it commands and say, I want you to do a flow chart. I want you to show that, from point A, we're going to get to point B and then point C. And then if they go to point D, blah, 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 and you just put in your thing and it will do it for you.
Yeah.
And then you can sort of then go, that, bang. There you can sort of show to the picture and this is where we're going to use it too with law, is that what I found was that when you can get a flow chart, you can see where the grant of power flows through. So you can't argue with that. So you can say, how do you argue with a picture? And I'll tell you what I mean by that is because when I was up in Northern Territory with the Craig Oldroyd versus the Minister for Health, Natasha Files, he was trying to sue her for extending the state of emergency. Now, 2 weeks before, there was another guy called David Patel, and he was running the same case, and he won, and he got it actually paid out and settled before it went to trial. So the government settled in $200,000. And why? Because he was an expert in health and safety, and he created a flow chart. This is back in 2022, so it wasn't with AI, but he created his own flow chart to show that when the emergency powers were put on, then after all that, time went by, and then they started opening up to festivals and this and that.
Yeah.
Then down here, like as the timeline went on, they extended the state of emergency, and he showed with the flow chart saying, well, there was no reason to extend the state of emergency if you already done this and then this and this, right? And they could not argue with it, right? They couldn't argue with it, so they weren't going to go to trial, and they went settled $200,000 because of a flow chart. So when this came about, I was like, the AI can do flow charts now. I'm like, you know what? Well, this is going to be interesting. So I haven't quite used it yet, you know what I mean? But we've seen it, and there's just so much going on, Daniel. Like, as in, so much intelligence is coming through. So many people are challenging it. So many different jurisdictions of people having a crack.
Yeah.
The government is pulling their hair out, and this is where you're starting to see the crack starting to appear. Karen Webb's gone, the Commissioner of New South Wales. We've got this John Venditto from the Assistant Commissioner of Police in South Australia. You've got SA. No state, their attrition rates are through the floor. That's why they had Grant Stevens advertising to internationals. We've shown the videos of the internationals that are absolutely shocking. The Indian guys that, sticking up their fingers and don't know how to interact with Australian Aussies, which we called out. I called this out two and a half years ago, saying that, it's not going to be good because they don't understand our laws, our customs, and all that sort of stuff.
Just quickly, Johnny, I got something sent to me yesterday about there was a police officer the audio's been released about him saying he'd be happy to shoot Australia Day protesters. You saying that?
That was the National Socialist Network boys, Joel Davis and that. Yeah, they came out and they deciphered that. And that is, people have got to realise that is, the level of insane people that we've got working with.